Okay, well, let's welcome Jeff Dowler here to the summit. Thanks a lot, Jeff, for being here.
Oh, I'm thrilled, Mario. Thanks for asking me to be part of this group. It's exciting.
Yeah, it's cool. You're my blogging expert, so I'm really happy to have you here, and thanks for taking the time out.
My pleasure.
So, like we talked about before, you're just going to give 3 tips on how to help my business. It's like we're just having a cup of coffee, very informal. So I'll let you kind of go with it. And if I have any questions or anything, I'll let you know. And maybe after each tip, I might clarify something. And then at the end of the 3 tips, I do have a bonus question. So I'm going to catch you off guard here, but it's very easy. So we'll do that together. So
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead and start with your tip number 1.
All right. I think one of the key things that all agents need to be focused on continually, but it's even more important for a new agent, is to learn as much as you possibly can. You know, we go to real estate school, which doesn't prepare us to transact business. It teaches us how to answer questions on an exam and get our license, but it doesn't teach us how to transact business, how to find leads, how to negotiate, how to help our buyers and sellers problem solve and those kinds of things. And as consumers become more and more educated these days via the internet and talking with friends and family and whatnot, they demand more and more from us. We have to be as competent as we possibly can and know as much about our job and what we're supposed to do to help and protect our clients as we can. So that means asking questions, networking with people who are more experienced than we are. Perhaps when you're first starting out, you need to shadow someone, whether it's your broker or some other senior agent who really knows the business. Reading as much as possible, going to webinars, going to seminars, doing things like the Council of Residential Specialists, the CRS certification. The training and education is important, and we really need to build our knowledge base continually because it's always changing. So that would be, I think, my number 1 tip for any agent, but particularly for people who are starting out.
Yeah, and I think it's very applicable even to people like ourselves that have been in the business, 10, 15 years. We need to stay in tune. We need to be informed about what's happening. And that's why we have the CE classes, the continuing education, and like the CRS. I don't know if you're going to talk more about that, but do you want to talk briefly about the CRS designation?
Yeah, I'd love to do that because, as you know, I'm very involved in CRS both at the state level as well as the national level. In fact, we're having the annual convention in San Diego next week, and I have a committee that I co-chair, and I'm involved as a regional vice president. So it's something very near and dear to my heart. But the reason it's important to me and why I think it's important for so many other people is the learning, the education, the training that the designation brings through the classes that are part of getting the certification. But the other big piece of CRS is the network of really top agents around the country from where you can learn on an ongoing basis all kinds of things. I have found that CRS agents are always willing to share their marketing strategies, the things they're doing with buyers and sellers that are working, uses of technology and all kinds of things. And that kind of learning you don't get from a book. You get that learning by going to events where some of these top agents are at, where you can really learn what they're doing and put some of those practices into place in your own business. So I think it's my philosophy is that education is ongoing. It just has to be. You can't fall into the trap of saying, well, I've been there 20 years, I've seen it all, I've done it all, I don't need to learn anything more, I'll just keep doing things the same way. It's a constant ebb and flow in terms of your education, your training, and again, learning as much as you can so you can support the buyers and sellers who are becoming increasingly demanding themselves about what a realtor will do for them.
So just to kind of get an idea, you and I started, early 2000s, I think, same time. When did you get your CRS designation?
I got it in November 2005, so it's about 3 years after I started back in Boston as a realtor.
Okay, great. Yeah, I started in 2002 also.
There you go. There you go. It's hard to believe, but things have changed so much. But when I was thinking about this tip, I was thinking back to when I started as a realtor, and I just had no clue what I was doing. I mean, I really didn't. And I'm sure that's true of many new agents. You get out there, you have your license, and you don't know. You don't know what to do. So you have to ask questions. You have to be around people who know what's going on and who are willing to help you. And I think that's an ongoing process for us to remain vibrant realtors and knowledgeable and competent. You just constantly have to keep up with all the changes that are out there. Whether they're federal changes, local regulatory changes, just the way people are using the internet is another component.
Okay, great. Okay, we'll go to your tip number 2 then.
The next thing kind of ties into what we were just talking about, and that has to do with the importance of the internet and the reality that buyers and sellers are more educated than ever about what's going on in our business. That's not to say that they necessarily know it all or that the information they have is accurate. The great thing about the internet is it's a fabulous array of information. I mean, you can find out anything you want by doing a Google search. The bad thing about the internet is a lot of that information, especially around real estate and listings and that sort of thing, is not accurate, or it's contradictory. And I think buyers and sellers, and we know this, are doing more and more research online before they ever get to talk to us or even want to talk to us. They're learning all kinds of things. They're learning how to make offers and how to qualify for a loan and how to find homes, and they're learning about home inspections and all these other things. The problem is that they don't necessarily have all the information, nor is it correct. And the value for us, I think, is that we can help them make sense of this information, and we can help them understand what's accurate and what's not. We all know Zillow, Zestimates, and other types of algorithms that are out there are inaccurate. And yet buyers and sellers rely on this information. So we really have to help them cut through all that and understand this is the reality of the local market. This is what's really happening locally. It's not what NPR or CNN or whoever's reporting, or even what NAR is saying. You really need to work with somebody who knows the local market. So I guess my overall summary on this point is that you really need to understand what your buyers and sellers are doing online. You need to be on the sites that they're using, the Zillows and the Trulias and Realtor.com and whatever else they're using. You need to understand what information's out there that they're finding. What sorts of things are they learning about inspections and escrow and title and getting qualified for a loan and how to do a short sale. All these things that they're reading about, we need to understand where our consumers are coming from so that we can help them where needed and correct things that are erroneous. So I think that's really a key point, and it's becoming more and more important all the time as the internet changes, as more information is available. We need to stay ahead of our buyers and sellers and really say, okay, I understand why you like Zestimates, but here's the reality. This is what you need to know. This is how you need to use that information, but here's where it's wrong.
And I think that's really good. And I think I've seen, some of your blog posts and what you write about, and kind of what I see is that you're kind of educating your buyer and seller on these issues. So like you said, there's a lot of bad information out there for whatever reason, but your local market, and you just kind of simplify it. And I've seen what you've written, and you talk about in a very simple way how to help your buyer and seller understand some of these issues. And can you speak a little bit about that?
Well, I think educating our buyers and sellers is a critical part of what we do. We have to understand the process, how to problem solve, how to negotiate. But we have to understand the issues that buyers and sellers are going to have, or the questions that they're going to have, and be able to talk about those in a very down-to-earth, easy to read, easy to understand format. And I think if you can sit down and write a blog article about what escrow means, or the kinds of inspections that you should have, or what you do when your loan comes back and the underwriter is saying you're not qualified, or you have these conditions that have to be met, you need to be able to explain that. If you can do that in writing, I think you truly do understand it and can explain it to your buyers and sellers. I think it's important to get that information out there, because that's what buyers and sellers are researching. They're looking for, how do I do this? How do I do that? And so as a realtor who's a blogger, I feel that part of my job is to get that information out there in a format that other people can understand and use. And obviously, when they find that information and if they think I'm someone who can help them, obviously that brings me business. But fundamentally, it goes back to educating people and correcting perhaps the information that they find online that simply is not correct or is contradictory, and also interpreting it for them. They read about Zestimates, they read about inspections, they read certain other kinds of things, but they don't necessarily understand what that information means for them. And our job is to help interpret that and make it understandable for them.
And you said it a few times, you're helping your customers understand these issues. And I think there's a big distinction people need to understand about blogging and writing articles, because you're not writing blogs to promote yourself. You're not like beating your chest and saying, I'm $1 million realtor. You've said it a few times. I'm writing to educate my clients, to help them understand. And that is, it's very simple, but it's very powerful, and the way you do it really works.
Well, I think that's a really key point, Mario, because let's face it, consumers these days, buyers and sellers, don't really care if we're number one in this neighborhood or we've sold X number of homes. They fundamentally don't care. What they want to know is how you can help them. They have a problem to solve. They want to buy a house. They want to sell a house. Our job is to help them do that as effectively as possible, to get the best price, to find the right home under the right terms and conditions, and to minimize the hassles along the way. That's fundamentally what we're there to do. And so talking about how wonderful you are really doesn't matter to them. They don't care. They're going to get to know you and like you by reading about you, and that's really what's going to bring them to you for assistance. Not everyone takes that approach, of course, and that isn't to say that we shouldn't be competent and we shouldn't have be proud of the awards that we've won or the accomplishments that we've had. But fundamentally, consumers don't care. It's what's in it for me. How can you help me? That's the bottom line. And adding to that database of information that's out there about real estate is something that I think all of us should do in any way that we can. Whether you write well or not, there are ways for you to get that information out there to educate consumers and correct the erroneous information that we find out there all the time. Okay,
great. Okay, well, go ahead to your next tip
number 3. I'm sure this is true for many people. This was true for me. When I first started in real estate, no one told me that I needed to track my expenses and how to pay attention to that sort of thing. Obviously, I figured it out pretty quickly, because you're going to be filing your taxes, and you need to know what you're spending money on, what are deductions and all that kind of thing. But no one ever sat down with me and said, this is what you should do. These are the things you should track. These are the categories you should, take a look at. And you also need to track your income, where it's coming from, and that sort of thing. So I think a really key point, and something that I do pretty religiously now, is to track all of my expenses, what I'm spending all my money on as it relates to my business, as well as all the income that's coming in from different sources. And I do that on a monthly basis. I have a huge spreadsheet that allows me to monitor on any given day how much money I've made that month. Am I in the red, or am I in the black with my income from commissions and referrals and whatnot versus the money that's going out the door for my marketing and so on. I can't emphasize that enough, and I wish I had started doing this more effectively earlier. I've always tracked my expenses for tax purposes, but in terms of having a profit and loss statement that I look at all the time, and I try to update it once a week with any expenses. So I'm always looking at to say, okay, how am I doing this month? Are there places maybe I should spend less money? Are there things I should spend more money on because they're effective? I think that's key, because fundamentally at the end of the year, you really need to know, what have I spent, but more importantly, what have I kept? How much money have I made? We're in business to make money. That's why we do this, even though we love real estate. We have families, we have houses, we have bills to pay. We need to make money. And if you don't know what you're spending it on and how much you're bringing in, then you can't be effective. So that would be my third and I guess my third tip.
So when did you start doing this? Recently, or kind of a few years into your career?
Well, I started tracking all my expenses in a spreadsheet the first year. And I don't think anyone told me to do this. I just sort of figured out, well, I need to have some way of knowing what I'm spending. I put all my receipts in file folders that were organized. So I sort of knew how much I was spending, but I didn't really track anything beyond that. And over the years, the system got a little bit more formal. But recently, I was involved with a business coach for a while, and she shared this profit and loss spreadsheet with me. And I've modified it a little bit to include specific expenses that are relevant to my business. But it's been terrific, because it's put me into kind of a very formalized, structured way of looking at my business, at least on a monthly basis. But I have a calendar note every Friday. I am supposed to go in and add any receipts that I've thrown into the file, so I can see what I've spent that week. And then at the end of the month, I can see, am I in the red or am I in the black? Not only just for that month, but I can see overall where my business has come. And it's a little bit unnerving when you see that maybe you're not making as much money as you thought you were. When you start looking, you say, oh, I just got this big commission check for $15,000, but then you realize you just spent $12,000 that month in all your marketing. That's kind of sobering. And it's important to know where that money's going, and is it being used effectively. So it's gotten to be a pretty structured part of my business now, and it's been very, very helpful.
Yeah, no, that's good. Just a couple things I do to make it easier for myself. So when I pay my expenses, I just have a company checkbook, my LLC, and then I have a corporate credit card. So whenever I pay out my expenses, 99% of what I do is paid out by this check, and I have a check registry, and then I have a corporate card. So I don't do it monthly like you do, but at least I have all the expenses available to me through my checkbook and through my corporate credit card. If I didn't do it that way, coming up, beginning of the year, it would be really hard to track that. So you probably do something like that too, but that was something that I did early on that helped me tracking my expenses.
I mean, I think the point is, there are a number of different ways that this can be done, and some people are more structured than others. But however you do it, whether it's a spreadsheet or you use QuickBooks, or you have an accounting person who does all your checks and billing and everything, for however it's done, the important thing is that it needs to be done, and you really need to understand where your business is at. It is a business. It's, you're responsible. You're the CFO of your business. And you need to understand, the accounts payable, accounts receivable, and all of that sort of thing. And no one ever really, as I said, no one ever told me I really needed to do this. And I think that's a tough lesson for people who are starting out, where they just have no clue. And all of a sudden, tax time comes, they have no idea how much they've spent. They don't have receipts. They just don't know. And no one, unless they have a good broker who sat down and said, this is what you need to do, or some mentor said, this is what I suggest you do so you understand your the economics of your business, you're in a tough spot if you don't do that.
Yeah, I think it's good to be aware of it every month, like you said, because you get a $15,000 commission. But one thing that, and I've noticed, and you probably do too, kind of last point I want to make here, is that it's not the $12,000 advertising campaign that gets us. It's the $30, the $40 a month, the $50 a month. And then before we know it, we sign up for all these programs and we got like $500 a month in different advertising programs we're doing. And that's why your monthly check is a good tool.
It's that's really true. And I've actually had several things that I've been doing, they were kind of $20, $30, $35 a month for a number of years. And as I've been looking at my expenses and saying, I'm not getting anything from that, So the $30 a month becomes $360 a year. And I said, that's a lot of money. And so I have just terminated a number of different websites that were just a waste of time, a waste of money. And so it does help you focus more on what your spending is and what's really effective. You really have to track what is working for you, what's bringing you business versus what's just money going out the door, because it sounded like fun and maybe 3 or 4 years ago it worked, but it's not working now, and so you're spending all this money and you don't even realize it because it's automated and it's just it goes out of your bank account or out of your credit card and you don't even think about it. Well, tracking stuff will help you realize where those gaps are and where you're making mistakes.
Well, this is a good tip. It's something I need to do, so thank you.
Thank you. It's tough. It's not fun, but once you get into the habit, it's much easier, I think, and that was a good lesson for me.
Well, good. Okay, well, so we're wrapping up here. So here's the bonus question. So very easy. So here it is, beginning of January 2016. So I just want you to look back 2015, and I want you to think about an accomplishment, a goal, something that you achieved. It could be personal, it could be business, something where you kind of like, shook your fist and said, yeah, I did it, and you feel good about it.
Oh my gosh, that's a tough question. Boy, that's hard to say. I guess the thing I would say is that one of the things that I have always struggled with personally is that I get distracted during the day when I'm working. I get distracted by things and I kind of working on multiple things at the same time, which really isn't terribly effective. But it's kind of a habit of mine. And I've also had a habit of not saying no when I need to. And one of the things that I've worked on this year, which I think is an accomplishment, and I'm still working on it, but it's an accomplishment, is I've actually said no to several people who wanted me to participate in an activity or get involved in a committee and do something that was going to take me away from my business. And I just said, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. One of those things happens to be saying no to being on the Southern California CRS board this year. I just decided that I need to focus my energies on some other things, and it was very hard to say that, but I'm pleased to say that I kind of stood my ground. It was an objective that I had, is to get better at saying no, and I did. So I guess that would be the one thing that comes to mind that I'm proud of, and I felt good about it afterwards, which reinforces the fact that it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, I run into the same situation because, we want to be nice, we want to help people, but it's hard because we're individual entrepreneurs in a sense,
Yep.
and if you probably don't have like an assistant or somebody to kind of be your buffer. If we did, they could be the hammer and say, no, Jeff is too busy, or Jeff's got something going on. So when we have to do it ourselves, it is hard.
Well, it's something, and again, this came out of something, the work I did with my business coach, so, in the last several years. And I actually have a little piece of a Post-it taped to the top of my computer screen that says, just say no. Kind of this reminder to me that there are times when I need to say no, whether it's, I don't want that product, I don't want that service, I can't do that appointment, I can't, whatever it is. And sometimes it's personal, sometimes it's business. Because fundamentally I have to balance my personal and family life. That's most important to me, and giving up some other things so I have time to spend with my grandkids and do some of the traveling I've needed to do, and those kinds of things. That's important, and I think the realization that I need to keep working on that is an accomplishment in and of itself for me.
Well, I'm glad you didn't say no to me to be part of this.
That was good. I thought about it. I said, no, this is something I really want to do, and it was important, and it worked for my schedule. So,
Well, great. Well, thank you so much. This has been really helpful. Thank you, Jeff, and I appreciate you sharing your knowledge and all your experience. So, thank you.
My pleasure. It was great fun, Mario. I hope we can talk again.